So like.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are really happy on behalf of Kharkiv.
Yeah, I think we're online.
I'm really happy on behalf of IT Cluster to introduce our new program. And later on, you will hear more about IT ambassadors. As of today, I'm happy to introduce to you the other participants who will be communicating with you today. First of all, we already have Boris Vishnevsky, who is online and whom we're really happy and really grateful to have online today, as far as he's not only one of the gurus, but also a person who was born in Kharkiv. And all of you know how important it is to us that people who were born in the city at some point of time are ready to come back and to bring back their expertise, their advice, to bring additional motivation to the young people and young professionals here. And therefore, it's really critical that Boris Vishnevsky is starting up with us today. But first of all, I would like to introduce to you one of our member companies and one of our members of supervisory board, who is Vasily Salashuk, and who will tell you a bit more about our IT ambassadors program. Vasily?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I'm Vasily Salashuk. So I'm CEO of Insart and also a board member of Kharkiv IT Cluster. So basically we decided to start the IT Ambassadors program recently, and we have like several purposes for this program. So the one is to build a network of people who are related to Ukraine and also are experts in IT and technology business and who lives abroad and can bring some good expertise and share this expertise together with Ukrainian community. And also the other, so basically the other goal is to handle different types of events like webinars and meetups with IT ambassadors basically. And today we're starting this first series of webinars with Boris Vishnevsky, and we'll have more experts coming in January and in February. So let's start, and Boris, please introduce yourself once again in more details, and we can start with the very interesting topic, which is Industry 4.0. And I'm pretty sure that you have many interesting information to share with us today. So Boris, please.
Okay, hello everyone. I wanted to thank Basil and Sofia for inviting me to speak and share with you my experience and point of view on opportunities that lie in front of us. By the way of introduction, my name is Boris Vishnevsky. I have broad technology and cross-industry experience leading many technology innovations and technology transfer projects that supported key IBM go-to-market initiatives. These projects transform IBM internally and also deliver many technology and business capabilities that would enable the business models for many other clients. Social business transformation, e-utilities, on-demand and cloud computing, services-oriented architecture, legacy modernization, smarter planet, smarter city, and most recently, cognitive computing are some of the examples of the projects that I work on. My clients were diverse and included many Fortune 500 companies as well as Big Four consulting firms that I work with as a clients. Some of the very large and interesting engagements that I led were with City of Austin, Texas, City of New York that included New York Police Department, Department of Education, as well as many other city agencies. I also work with United States federal agencies, Department of Defense, local agencies, large financial institutions, and many other companies. I earned graduate business degree from Villanova University, and also completed executive leadership program at Boston University that broadened my engagement with key executives and perspective on industry and global market insight. I continue to work with both small and large companies to identify new and non-obvious approaches of integrated business and technology, strategy, and innovation. In this presentation, I wanted to share with you my thoughts and experiences that would help you and your businesses to chart your own path and also path for your clients through this very turbulent global economic environment that we have. So I'm going to switch to some slides that I have. And I should mention that we have an interactive chat enabled on YouTube, so that if you have any questions, you're welcome to type your questions on a YouTube channel, and Vasil or myself will pick up your questions, we'll read them so that we have a good recording of your input. We will continue the session in English, but you're welcome to ask questions in Russian. We're all bilingual, but we will continue and largely present in English language. So with that, we're going to get going. So these are some of the topics that I wanted to share with you. I want to start with sharing the definition and historical perspective that will help me highlight some of the key points that I wanted to make and share with you and get your perspective on. I wanted to define what I call dynamic disruptive environment, which represents the technology, industry, and business status the way we see it today. And then I want to share with you my thoughts on how we can operate in this highly complex and environment and transform the uncertainties that we face into practical business opportunities. So looking at the computing history of the computing from historical perspective, it is easy to see, and I hope that many of us had opportunity to study and learn that computing history started with mechanical systems. One of the milestones in this evolution was IBM and other companies at the turn of 19th century introducing mechanical tabulating machines. And interestingly enough, many of these mechanical computing equipment still proudly displayed in many facilities that IBM has around the world. From mechanical computing, we rapidly progressed first to analog and digital hybrid equipment. And some of this equipment was actually invented in Ukraine, in city of Kiev, and was first deployed in city of Kharkiv. Those were first analog machines that started the evolution of digital computing era. Once we entered the digital computing, the evolution rapidly progressed in several different directions. We're all familiar with history of personal computers, as well as mainframes that got in by itself disrupted when internet and e-business entered the stage. During this time, in earlier times when cloud computing utilities, architectures, and models were deployed, both Google and IBM shifted their attention and focus to container-based data center architecture, which at the time I found to be very interesting. In Google case, the entire architecture of data centers and how computing resources were utilized were based on container models, where what you see on the picture, the blue thing, the blue container, it actually represents an IBM approach to business continuity and recovery services, where IBM made computing resources and data storage available to clients for recovery purposes in a container form. Then from that, we rapidly proceeded through services-oriented architecture and microservices architecture to big open hybrid data and some of the constructs that I'm going to highlight and share with you on the next slides. But what I wanted to share with you also is that about a couple of weeks ago, Amazon, specifically Amazon Web Services, had a conference in Las Vegas called reInvent. And one of the interesting announcements that caught my eye during this conference was Amazon AWS introduction of Snowmobile. And if you didn't have chance to virtually attend or attend in person that conference, AWS Snowmobile is Amazon answer to moving very large quantities of data in petabytes, from on-premise and hybrid cloud-based computing environment strictly to cloud. So again, Amazon took a concept of container-based architecture that existed and specifically pivoted with focus on data architecture and dealing with extremely large volumes of data. So keeping this history in mind, we can now proceed to define what dynamic disruptive environment is. And for that, I'd like to take a look at the brief history of industry revolution or evolution, industry evolution in general. So humanity started with gathering and farming that over the years progressed to what is called Industry 1.0. Industry 1.0 was characterized by urbanization and industrialization powered largely by steam power, where many human activities got first mechanized. From this point on, humanity proceeded to what is known to be Industry 2.0, where electricity and mass production conveyor systems took over the mechanical activities that were previously carried by hand. From Industry 2.0, we rapidly proceeded to Industry 3.0, and this is where I'd like to parallel the evolution of computing systems that we had that consisted of mechanical, analog, digital, cloud, and now we are already looking at cloud computing with evolution of industries. What worth highlighting is that most of these capabilities roughly fit in the Industry 3.0 framework or time frame. And the key capabilities that we all work to develop, leveraging computing environment during Industry 3.0, is instrumentation of computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacture, and ultimately ERP systems. It's interesting to point out that the history of Amazon Web Services, as an example, has its origin in automation of supply chain. And that in turn brings us to Industry 4.0. And one of the interesting characteristics as related to Industry 4.0 that we should consider and highlight is that it's a pervasiveness of cloud, where during Industry 3.0, many executives and many of the clients, customers, were thinking about cloud-first approach. During Industry 4.0 framework, the focus and attention switched from cloud-first to cloud-only approach. Similarly, industrial automation systems that were focusing on various implementations of ERP are now considered Internet of Things, blockchain, and other advanced capabilities powered by extremely large volumes of data, if you recall the snowmobile example, as well as advanced artificial intelligence, advanced analytics capabilities that ultimately lead to integration and interaction of human and machine interfaces. So if we will try to summarize what took place, many companies, and I hope you're familiar with these acronyms. So CAMS is an IBM acronym that stands for Cloud Analytics Mobile Social Security. SMAC acronym was pioneered by EY and then subsequently Ernst & Young, which is one of the big four consulting companies, and subsequently picked up and continues to be used by some of the industry analysts. And again, similarly, it stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. The Open Group, which is a cross-industry organization, started Project 3.0 that also focus on these key strategic technology and also business imperatives that facilitated by cloud, analytics, mobile, and social. All this that took place roughly in 2010-2014 timeframe was underscored by interesting experience. I had opportunity to attend Gartner Symposium with one of my clients in 2013. And one of the keynotes at this Gartner Symposium was a presentation by Peter Sondergaard from Gartner. And key point in Peter's presentation kind of stuck in my mind. The point that Peter was making that we need to prepare to digital industrial economy and digital industrial revolution that will be built on foundation and nexus of forces. And this point of nexus of forces coming together that will change how we engage and how we rationalize business needs and continue to support it with technologies that we're responsible for, really draw my attention. Peter's point further got highlighted by similar statement made and publicized by World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum around in 2015-2016 timeframe acknowledged that we stand on the brink of technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. And the other interesting point that you can find in this publication is that we do not yet know how this evolution will unfold. This experience has prompted me to remember a quote that I carried with me throughout most of my career. That quote was made by Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, who addressed graduate of one of the computer schools in around 1980 timeframe. Admiral Grace Hopper mentioned that life was simple before World War II. After that, we had systems, and we continue to engineer the systems today. So if we take that lesson from Grace Hopper and paraphrase it in the context of Industry 4.0, it may sound something like this. The life was simple before Industry 4.0. After that, we had hybrid cloud, hybrid data, Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. That leads me to my point of core elements that will define dynamic disruptive environment. So it will definitely involve and be based on digital virtual global economy. And those are very interesting concepts and key concepts that we need to get familiar with. Similarly, back to Peter's quote, it will be based on nexus and confluence of forces that transform business to IT alignment that I will speak further in the presentation into a really fusion of business and technology. And alignment and fusion will have different characteristics that I will about to highlight. From our perspective, that will require and force us to reinvent how we respond to transforming business needs by bringing together and creatively leveraging hybrid cloud and hybrid IT, hybrid data, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, as well as global technology platforms that are rapidly emerging, which is Internet of Things and blockchain. And if we do not change how we respond to this transforming business needs, that will lead us to this particular example that I illustrate on the cartoon that I borrowed. The 3D printing will become an advanced and very popular method of delivering goods and services. So what is special about dynamic disruptive environment? As I mentioned, it's based on fusion of business and technology that I will highlight in the next slide. It will present us with unique and disruptive opportunities that we need to learn how to realize. It will also prompt transition from engineering to composition of business solutions that will force us, and already forcing us, to change how we think, rationalize, cope, and respond to these rapidly emerging business needs. And then there is that construct. There is a very popular acronym that you may see that has been studied and that's entering boardrooms. It's called VUCA, and it stands for vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Interestingly enough, that term and notion of VUCA was first introduced by United States War College. Military planners have learned that it's quite easy to draw the plan for upcoming battle, but when battle begins, very often these plans needed to be changed and modified. And commanders found the need to rapidly adapt and improvise in order to be able to effectively respond to emerging needs as battle unfolds. Some of the characteristics of Industry 4.0, they force us as a commanders, as a technology commanders, to enter that battle. Thus, we need to learn what VUCA is, what does it mean for us, and how we can effectively respond. So I'm going to step through very quickly and focus on these 4 points at a very high level. So first, we're going to focus on fusion of business and technology. For a long time, as a technology professional, working with management consulting professionals, we partnered to align in the most effective ways business and IT through systems engineering. This model, based on emerging demands of dynamic disruptive environment that we just reviewed, really is forcing us to consider rapid emergence of hybrid cloud-based consumer-focused solutions. These solutions are not really engineered through typical and conventional system engineering needs. Instead, these solutions are brought to bear very rapidly as a composable business solutions. And in terms of skills and in terms of input that it will require from us, these two models are quite different. If we would review these models side by side, we could see that in a typical system engineering world, we started with defining solution architecture that subsequently was transferred to DevOps and engineering, subsequently was passed on to deployment team and operations team to actually run these solutions. If we look at it in 3 tiers, business function owners were working with business analysts that in turn were partnering with engineers, subject matter experts, architects, and designers, folks and teams that represented the technology landscape. And these folks, in some cases, not all, work with user-centered designs, that's what UC stands for, that ultimately represented customer needs. In a model, if we compare it side by side, where business and technology is fusing, the processes change. There is a clear, visible need to understand what the salience, which is non-obvious effects of business needs are, again, in a global digital virtual industrial economy. Then the design, both business design, technology design, product design, have become very prevalent, and design considerations and knowledge of design processes and design-oriented innovation culture have entered the boardroom and executive ranks. So design itself, by itself, doesn't stand on its own. Along with innovation, it changes, it has to change corporate culture that will enable the composition of those business solutions that represent the fusion of business and technology. So if we take a look again at this 3-tier perspective, how business and technologies align, we clearly see a shift. And these are some of the considerations for the shift that I wanted to highlight and share with you. User-centered design and customer really turns to be a primary focus of those composable business solutions. In many cases, business owners, business function owners by themselves, they leverage cloud-based capabilities to rapidly assemble, rapidly deploy technologies and capabilities that's needed to automate the business function. And they do it in rapid response to customer needs. So what it does to professions like architects, designers, it forces them to migrate from a technology domain to domain previously occupied by business analysts. In the same space where previously led and managed by business analysts, new roles rapidly emerge. Those are the roles of big head thinkers, disruptors, and troublemakers that creatively leverage technology capabilities to support new or define emerged virtual business-related functions. So in this turbulent world, again, the world that characterized by this acronym VUCA, as a technology leaders, what can we do to work through and deal with those vulnerabilities, uncertainties, complexities, and ambiguities? One of the key things that I found to be critically important is that we need to continue to learn. And we should not just learn by ourselves. In order to get and enable the migration from technology domain to domain previously occupied by business analysts, we need to learn some elements of business. It doesn't mean that we will become businessmen or business-oriented professionals, but we need to acquire enough insight to understand how business functions would fit, how they can be further automated, virtualized, and digitized in a global economy. In order to do that, we need to change how we think. And we need to learn, develop, and practice a science of cognitive intelligence. Social intelligence have been very prevalent on the market and been pioneered by many different companies. The cognitive intelligence that inform effective interactions of human and machines will become a next science that will power up and change how we think about those emergent business models and solutions that support it. In order to be successful, it's very difficult to avoid failures and mishaps building these new capabilities. So as a technology leader, we need to give our teams explicit permission to learn, think, view new business context, and envision the future differently. What it means is that we need to leverage design thinking, we need to leverage innovation, we need to learn to fail very quickly and fail forward, by which we learn from our failures so that we can rapidly get up and reapply the knowledge that we learn to new approach of solving sticky challenges that may resist our initial attempt to address them. We need to develop capability to envision the future. The future is very difficult to predict, but it's quite possible to envision. There are different approaches to envisioning the future, from interactive design to big mind thinkers approaches that can easily identify big, hairy, audacious goals. There was a book that you can find on Amazon that highlights approaches to identifying, exploring, and implementing these big, hairy, audacious goal ideas that embrace dichotomy and complexity of the environment that we operate in. And last but not the least, we need to work with engaged teams. We should not let complexities of the world to discourage us. We need to continue and focus on intrinsic motivators, such as autonomy, mastery, and purpose. We need to promote with our team and working with our clients the culture of engaged employees and customers. So These are some of the high-level thoughts that I wanted to share with you. And now we'll get back to our YouTube question channel, and we have some time for your questions that I will do my best to respond to. Thank you, Vasil. Back to you.
Thank you, Boris, for the very interesting presentation. So can you please switch to yourself so we can see you?
Okay, we'll do that. Hello, everyone, again.
Okay, so basically, I have a few questions. So if you wish, I can start. So you mentioned the VUCA world, and the question is, what does it mean for Ukraine? So basically, we see that Ukraine is affected, I think, by all these aspects that you have mentioned, which are vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So basically, what do you think? What does it mean for Ukraine? What should we do as from the technology point of view, from the technology business point of view, to be to mitigate maybe these risks for us as well? So what do you think?
Oh, one of the things that we can do, we're already doing, which is we need to keep the doors open and continue to communicate and continue to lead some of the activities that you, Sophia, and other folks are engaged with. There are 2 or 3 reasons at the top of my mind why these bridges, open communications, with specific focus on learning, idea, and information exchange are important. One is global perspective. Globalization of the economy is not a choice. It's basically the rule that continues to drive the relationship, continue to drive the innovation and proliferation of some of the business models. Very visible and very popular examples are virtual currency exchanges that started with Bitcoin and now is continuing with multiple other types of digital currency that facilitates different, other than just currency related, models of value exchange. The second point is, which is something that I touched on in the presentation and something that you and your team and others work on a daily basis. Technology capabilities, particularly cloud-only, hybrid cloud-only technologies, they're international in nature. If we look at proliferation and construction of modern hybrid cloud data centers that are supplied by all of the different vendors, there are probably as many of these virtual cloud data centers that are constructed in US as compared to build in Asia, Europe, or other parts of the world. So to me, that's a facilitation of the fact that computing and technology that we lead in different areas and how we apply these capabilities to support business functions, they're global in nature. And the third element is data. Again, that example that I shared with you that impressed me the most, AWS Snowmobile. The volumes of data and how data is getting exchanged and transported and what business value and what insight the data carries is not controlled by boundary of any different country. So data and meaning that we can derive from that data is also international in its nature. And working collectively, we can derive that unique meaning from all these technology and capabilities that are available to us.
All right. So, Boris, thank you for your answer. So I have got another question. So what do you think? What does it mean? What benefits can we have in Ukraine about Industry 4.0. So basically, how can we implement these concepts for Ukraine? So how can we benefit as a country? Also, how the IT business in Ukraine can benefit because of the Industry 4.0. So could you please share your thoughts on this?
This is a difficult question because I have very limited insight into industry and business demands, business needs, the way they exist in Ukraine. But what worth highlighting is that from my perspective, I see the reason that I'm speaking to you. I see the reasons why you and I connected. You traveled to US recently, so you probably is in a much better position to answer this particular question as compared to what I can. All I can say is that, again, globalization and virtualization of business function would be one of these capabilities, but I'd like to hear your perspective from what you learned on your recent trip to US and how you compare market and business activities in Kharkiv as compared to your conversation that you had with US-based companies.
Yeah, so in Ukraine, many companies are already involved in implementation of many different solutions using all that kind of things like big data, analytics, artificial intelligence, like chatbots, like definitely hybrid cloud of different types, and you know, we're starting. We don't see too much of this applied for, you know, as a benefit for Ukrainian economy. I mean, internally. But for the on the global market, I think Ukrainian soft engineers are very competitive from this point of view. But you know, the question is also about how can we maybe apply these technologies internally in Ukraine as well. So basically, this is what I see. I have another one question also. So you basically mentioned the blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and you know, it's very emergent topic at the moment, and it's a buzzword, and we see maybe some kind of bubble on the cryptocurrency market. But you know, the blockchain technology by itself, I personally think has a really bright future. And what do you think? Is this you know, what would be like real world cases that we will see in next years about the blockchain? And also, very interesting. We have that discussion previously with you. Do you see any use cases for blockchain, not in the financial world, but maybe for, you know, to apply it for some other types of solutions and business domains?
Okay, yeah, that's definitely interesting area, and very hard just based on current market valuation of Bitcoin, which exceeded, I think, by last count, like $1,500 per one Bitcoin on a Bitcoin exchange. So I would position my thoughts in 4 different areas. So from a high conceptual perspective, the current dialogues and discussions about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency somewhat reminded me about earlier conversations about internet, and specifically e-commerce aspect of the internet, before Amazon, eBay, and others entered the e-commerce arena. So the skepticism level of, particularly as related to security, payments, what have you, about e-commerce leveraging internet were quite high. Nevertheless, many of the companies, small and large, succeeded spectacularly in this e-commerce space. So in the first category, I see clear parallels of history and lessons that we should learn from earlier days of the internet and kind of project these lessons and derive insight from these lessons and apply them to cyber currency. The second area, which is related to cyber currency, but I view it actually as being separate. The same technology that powers up Bitcoin and cyber currency market, which is shared distributed ledger, actually applies to many different other areas. So one of the areas that some of the companies already entered and started to actively explore, and those are, you know, large supply chain operators for consumer goods and also for industrial goods. They position supply chain as an extension of their internal ERP systems. And there are a couple of business challenges that this extension allows these companies to solve. Visibility, which is analytics of where goods are as they leave the warehouses, and how these goods, both consumer and industrial goods, find their ways from supply chain operator warehouse to the end destination, whether or not it's B2B transaction or B2C transaction. Distributed ledger provides unique visibility aspects to it. So that's one of the use cases. The other use case specifically related to pharma and food distribution is safety. So many companies, again, I think information about Walmart food distribution was in the press, how they leverage distributed ledger, which is the same technology that powers up Bitcoin, to track food-related items from their suppliers to their warehouses to the stores. So that's another use case. Two additional use cases related to distributed ledger are kind of interesting, and they came to my radar relatively recently. One related to gaming. There are many companies, and some of these companies are actually Ukraine and former Soviet Republic-based companies. They rapidly explore leveraging blockchain and shared ledger capabilities to introduce multiple gaming-related currency. And again, computer gaming and mobile gaming is very rapidly and extremely valuable business domain that, again, evolves at the global level, and it is highly virtual in its nature. Related by separate, similar but separate item from this is peer-to-peer economy. As global economy gets virtualized, enterprise of one and many unique entrepreneurs are engaging and delivering the capabilities, their services in a peer-to-peer basis. So I see a tremendous opportunity and tremendous value in a specific cryptocurrency, which may or may not be the same as a Bitcoin, to power up this peer-to-peer value exchange. So those are just some of the use cases and business cases that I see that are at the top of my mind. I hope it was helpful.
Yes, Boris, so thank you very much. You know, there is another question. So you mentioned so basically you described this transformation approach for the engineering teams. And currently, as you know, in Ukraine, most of the companies, software companies, they're professional services providers. However, we have a growing number of startups and companies who develop their own product. So what could you maybe advise to the entrepreneurs, to the engineers, to the technology managers who want to build, you know, their own startup, their own product, and turn from the services model to the product model? So what will you advise them, you know, taking into account the team's transformation approach that you mentioned in the presentation.
Okay. Again, there are a couple of ways of looking at it, and I will stay away from focusing on specific skills and how you transform the existing skills and how you leverage and transform organizational culture to design and innovation. That's probably a subject for another presentation, another dialogue. But I will answer your question in the following way. At some point in time, many software companies, many software vendors, they face themselves with the need to facilitate the transition from enterprise software to enterprise business model and how they deliver enterprise software to a market. Basically, what I'm referring to emergence of software service, cloud-based software delivery model. And during that transition, one interesting thing took place, which was one of the elements of that transition from enterprise software to enterprise business processes, effectively virtualized business processes delivered as software service, was a transition from an all-contained and tightly packaged software assets to more of a granular asset-based services business. So when I look at, and again, I'm going to take you and encourage you to take a look at some of the proceedings from AWS reInvent conference that took place a couple of weeks ago. I see the contents of AWS Marketplace as an example of large, tightly packaged and tightly contained enterprise software assets being transformed into more granular form. And that transition from enterprise software to cloud-based software service delivery capabilities, in my mind, is what's going to power up our ability to rapidly compose complex business solutions. Because as I look at the catalog of various assets that exist on Amazon, Microsoft, or IBM marketplaces, the catalog of these assets is quite amazing, and one can build the entire business model or technology needed to support a particular business model just by leveraging those components, those assets available on hybrid cloud environment. So to answer your question, what company operators, company owners like you can do in this transition is continue to work on existing projects, but look for opportunities to extract, if you will, some of the components that you developing, whether or not it's machine learning algorithms, analytics algorithm, artificial intelligence algorithms, as an example, into a set of assets that can be published on any of the cloud provider marketplaces.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you for your answer. And so here is another one question we have. So you worked in IBM for many years, and you know, many companies in Ukraine are looking into how to sell their services to big companies in US. So maybe you can share some of your experience. How should Ukrainian software and IT companies proceed with the, you know, with the sales process to sell services to big companies in US?
That's a very interesting question, Vasil. Thank you for bringing it up. So my answer is going to be based on my experience working at IBM, but also looking at the competitors such as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and others. So it is important to take very pragmatic and very simplistic approach to this question. And what this approach is going to be about is all of these cloud suppliers, and again, it's quite visible if we look at any of them. Any of the cloud suppliers, their business model is based on boarding more and more clients on their platform and delivering their hybrid cloud-based services to more and more customers. So to be successful at it, back to my point about learning. So first of all, you need to learn what particular cloud supplier is delivering to a marketplace. And if we take a closer look at, for example, IBM Bluemix platform, and compare it to Amazon Web Services platform and compare it to Azure platform, there are similarities, but also there are substantial differences in how these vendors position and what capabilities these vendors develop and deliver from these cloud platforms. So back to the model that I shared with you, learning, understanding similarities, differences, and differentiators between different cloud providers is probably the first important step. Because once you know what these similarities, differences are, you can do two things. First of all, you can position yourself as your company as a premium provider, premium supplier of development services, engineering services as related to particular cloud provider ecosystem. So you can basically position yourself as a subject matter expert and extension of services, professional services, consulting services teams, architecture teams, cloud architecture teams that individual providers, all individual providers have. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, the projects that you lead for your clients, knowing what the capabilities are of individual cloud supplier ecosystems and understanding those capabilities well, it would help you package software projects that you do in a set of software service or other virtual business capabilities that you can bring to these providers' marketplaces. And that's another important point in answering your question that I wanted to highlight. Those cloud providers, they do not just sell the capabilities that they have. They do not just look for recruiting additional and onboarding additional customers to the cloud platforms. They look for ways to promote and expand what they call business ecosystems, which is their cloud-based commerce environments. And you actively participating in exploring ways of how you can engage in that cloud-based ecosystem marketplace would be another important route to market for you and your company.
Okay. Okay, Boris. So thank you very much. And also, you know, there is another question. I think so. Let's have some final question, maybe. You know, we always, as services companies in Ukraine, we always think how to, you know, how to build the relations with our clients, like long-term relations with our clients. And for that, we need, you know, to understand the culture of people in US, of people working in IT and software industry in US. And somehow, you know, culturally we are somehow maybe different. But I see a very big progress in Ukraine to understand how to build this kind of relations. But you know, again, with all your experience working in IBM, in one of the biggest companies in the world and in US, and taking into account that you basically originally comes from Ukraine, from Kharkiv. So could you please share what is your experience to learn the business culture, US business culture, and what was the challenges, to understand maybe US business culture, and maybe few major points that Ukrainians should address when approaching people in US small and mid-sized, as well as in big big corporations from the cultural point of view.
That's a very good question, Vasil, and it's very, again, it's very interesting, complicated and critical subject, and I'm really glad that you brought this question up. So one of the first key points, which kind of simplistic, but it is nevertheless important, and that point is language. In my experience working with multiple European-based companies as well as international companies located in other parts of the world, English language had become de facto standard in business communications across the world for one reason or another. Yet I still see, particularly for small startup companies that are coming from Eastern Europe, where language barrier exists, and being able to successfully engage in a foreign market, particularly market of United States, which has some specific characteristics that I will highlight next, without robust language, it will be very, very difficult. To highlight and facilitate that point, I will share one simple example that I learned over the years. Cultural alignment begins with alignment of mindset. And person thinking in one language and trying to communicate in another language is not really helpful getting to that nearly perfect alignment and being able to engage, particularly with business users, the need that I highlighted earlier in my presentation. So language is one important consideration. The second point is, I will call it emergence, meaning that it's very difficult to learn foreign culture at a distance. One of the best way, and I was lucky enough to realize that opportunity where I was able to emerge in a US-based culture that had become native to me. And there are substantial differences, and there will continue to be differences between different cultures in different countries and different markets around the world. Yet to learn and being able to successfully operate, particularly again at the business level, business transaction level, and communicate with business owners and executives, a very close understanding and mind alignment at the social cultural level is needed that can only be achieved through emergence. So some of the specifics of US market that you asked me about, again, it will be superficial, but I can highlight a couple. So first of all, the culture between different companies in the United States is not the same culture. Even if companies belong to the same segment of Fortune 50, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, the social culture, the corporate objectives, strategy, vision, mission, and corporate culture will differ substantially between different companies. And when you engage with these companies, you have to realize what is the vision, what is the mission, what is the focus on the clients, and how company presents itself to a market. And again, it is a substantial difference between different companies that operate in different segments. At the same time, there is one strong commonality that's not always acknowledged, but nevertheless that exist. And this is the market pressure. What it means is that all of the public companies, regardless of the philosophy point of view, they have to deliver monthly, quarterly, and annually result to their stockholders. And the value and the balance of focus between value that companies deliver to employees versus stockholders or shareholders and clients vary substantially. So being able to understand where is that balance in company focus, the balance between focus on clients, employees, shareholders, and stockholders is an important key in understanding market and corporate culture of the companies that you're working with.
All right. So thank you very much for these answers. So basically, thank you, Boris, for the whole presentation and answering our questions today. I think it was really beneficial for everyone to listen to the presentation and all the information. We will publish the video on our Kharkiv IT Cluster YouTube channel. So for those who were not available today to be online, so you will be able, to watch the video other time. And Boris, please maybe say some final words to to our people here.
Okay. Just once again, it was great pleasure to speak with you. I wanted to thank you and Sophia for leading these very important initiatives. And as you continue with the series, perhaps we can tackle in depth some of the subjects that I highlighted that may be of interest to you and your audience. Thank you again.
Sophia, please say something. We can't hear you. Okay.
Better now?
Anyway, yes, we can hear you now.
Good. That was a session of trials. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting and very exciting. And I'm quite sure that this will become some kind of basis for all of us, not only from the point of view of webinars and IT ambassadors program, but also from the point of view of our key focus for development. So, and basically key areas for development, not only as IT sector, but for all of us as IT professionals. So thanks once again. Thank you, Vasily, for such a great initiative and such a great start. And hope to see you all soon in the next webinars. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Boris, we're looking to see you in Ukraine soon. So
okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great meeting with everyone. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So goodbye to everyone. Thanks.